Welcome to Veronica Live, and we are here with our next guest this morning. His name is Leighton Grey. He's an attorney from Alberta, Canada, and he's the host of Grey Matter podcast. Welcome, Leighton, to Veronica Live.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be with you.
I know, and I'm going to love the Canadian accent. This is going to be wonderful. But anyways, we were just talking off air because the Supreme Court just came down with a ruling on behalf of January 6ers, and I wanted to hear your thought as a Canadian and what you thought about this, because I'm so excited. I feel like these people have been thrown in prison and the key's been lost, and we also, we just hosted this morning a J6er wife that's fighting the fight, and it has been horrific, Leighton, the treatment that these people have received. Do you think they were mass murderers?
Yes, and we've had a situation in Canada that's something akin to January 6th. Of course, everyone in America would know about the truckers' convoy, but they might be less familiar with the series of public prosecutions, political prosecutions that have arisen out of that. We had a number of men in a place called Coots, which is right on the Alberta-Montana border, who were imprisoned and have been imprisoned for years and are still facing prosecution under similar circumstances. The idea that this administrative state has the power to imprison people and really to do the work of injustice. So this Supreme Court decision, Loper Bright Enterprises, is really, really important because it signals that what legislatures are saying to, or what courts are saying to legislatures is this: look, we're not going to put up with this blob, this swamp, this administrative state deciding everything in a completely undemocratic way that subverts representative democracy. But the interesting thing now is when the power goes back to the legislatures, to the lawmakers, the people who we vote into office, what are they going to do with it? Because, we've had this struggle going back all the way to jolly old England, all the way back to the Magna Carta, where there was this tension between, an absolute monarch telling everybody what to do, evil King John, for example, or Charles I, who was beheaded, and the legislature and Parliament. And so that struggle was important to the United States. The United States said, to hell with this. We're going to create our own constitution with limited government. We're not going to have a king. But then over time, what's happened in places like the United States and Canada is our representative democracy, the ideal of it, the way it's supposed to function, has really been subverted and perverted because we have bureaucrats, administrative people deciding everything. And January 6th is sort of the ultimate example of this. It's the going way too far, and I think it's a very important decision the Supreme Court has issued, saying, look, you've exceeded the limits of administrative power. We have to get back to proper lawmaking. We have to get back to lawmaking that makes sense. We have to get back to government, by the people, for the people, in a sort of limited government sense. What we've seen under Biden, especially, and Obama in the United States, and under Trudeau in Canada, is this incredible expansion of the state, of the power of the state, beyond what was imagined by the original crafters of our respective constitutions.
So, Leighton, I remember talking about the Canadian truckers because it was so awful. And at one point, I remember the scandal was they were going to take their pets and euthanize them. So tell tell our listeners what the trucker scenario was, because they kind of roadblocked, an area of Canada, and it was insane, from bank accounts to let's kill your pets. I mean, that's when I lost it. You take my fur animals and I'm going to fight you. So, I mean, it was just awful. Yeah, no. So refresh our memory on that story.
Well, things have been, as many Americans probably are aware, things have been very bad since COVID in Canada. We've seen a progression, the expansion of this administrative state, and the broader discussion we could have is how Canada has really become a CCP client state that I think poses a geopolitical threat to the security of the U.S. And bringing that back down to the truckers' convoy, really what that was a sort of a populist movement started by a small group of people. The idea was to go to Ottawa to lobby the government, which wasn't listening to us and still isn't, saying, look, we at that point, people who were unvaccinated in Canada could not get on a plane, a train, or a ship. We couldn't leave our country. In fact, some of the provinces, which operate like states do in the U.S., were setting up borders within the country, which violates one of the basic constitutional principles. So the protest was a peaceful one, where the protesters wanted to have a conversation with the Prime Minister and his government. Of course, the Prime Minister wouldn't have that, and instead he invoked improperly emergency powers. Our courts have determined that this was done unconstitutionally. He jailed people. It was forcibly suppressed. He brought in mercenaries, foreign agents to do it. And also many hundreds of bank accounts were frozen, and some are still frozen in this country, even though there's been a court ruling against it. But the fight of the truckers was, of course, their life, their bread and butter was transporting goods back and forth across the U.S. border, and they couldn't do that because of the restrictions. But, all of that was really, in my respect for you, as somebody who's represented tens of thousands of workers impacted by vaccine mandates, I see the vaccine mandates in the U.S. and Canada as a concentrated attack on the working class, as a way to disentitle them and to destroy their ability to hold and to protect and to acquire personal property. And of course, as everyone knows now or should know, what we saw was the greatest transfer of wealth from the middle class, the working class, to the so-called elites and the uber rich than we've seen in recorded history.
Well, it was just disgusting, and I'm sorry to hear these people are still enduring this. And so tell us about Prime Minister Trudeau. And I remember I was trying to find the story because I remember there was like a woman in Parliament that like took him on, that I can't remember her name. Like she gave the most passionate speech I've ever heard. And so tell us about Trudeau and why he's a disaster.
Well, it's Dr. Jordan Peterson, who most Americans know who that is. He's probably the most famous Canadian now, besides Wayne Gretzky. He put it best. He described Justin Trudeau in the best way possible. He said he's a microphone, and who is he a microphone for? He's a microphone for a globalist message. And in my respectful view, what we're seeing with the World Economic Forum and UN Agenda 2030 and the World Health Organization are really terrorist fronts for the CCP. The CCP, it's no secret, they are trying to challenge U.S. hegemony, especially in the West. And those of us, even outside of the U.S., understand and know that it's the broad shoulders of the United States that are holding back the tide of globalism and are the bulwark against the protection of freedom for everyone in the West. And so coming back to Trudeau, back in 2011, he was asked, this is before he was Prime Minister, he was asked, which country in the world he admired the most. And he didn't say, our big brother to the south. He didn't say the United States, which was a little bit of a surprise. He didn't talk about our big daddy in jolly old England. He said China. And when he was asked why, he said he admired their basic dictatorship. Because, of course, going through the democratic process is such a nuisance. Having to pass bills and support and all that. You just want to be able to snap your fingers like Xi Jinping or Vladimir Putin and make law. And that's what he's been doing. What we've had in Canada is government by fiat. He doesn't listen to us. He doesn't govern for the good of Canadians. We have all the problems that the U.S. has, perhaps on a smaller scale, with the exception of immigration. Because what's happening in the U.S., what came out last night, what I thought Mr. Trump did a tremendous job of, is exposing this problem, the threat that migrants pose to the U.S. We have the similar problem in Canada, except it's legal, because our government, against our wishes, is actually flying these people into the country, importing them, quote unquote, legally, putting them up in hotels. And of course, Canada is a country of about 1/9 the population of the United States, about 40 million. So we're bringing in between 1.5 and 2 million people that we know about. So this is having a significant impact.
And where are your legal illegals coming from, Leighton?
Well, all the same parts of the world as you're seeing in the United States, mostly from Africa and from the Middle East, places from war-torn countries. But what's interesting is the sort of demographic of those people is they all seem to be fighting age men.
Lovely.
Getting,
Lovely.
but they're imposing a tremendous strain upon the social fabric of Canada, culturally, same as in the United States, but also upon things like healthcare and inflation. Now we have a housing crisis for the first time in our country because we don't have enough places for these people to live. And of course, leftist governments that want to expand their power, they love this because it creates a new emergency. And so now everyone's talking about the government is supposed to create housing. Well, as a Christian conservative, I don't like the sound of that. I don't think that the government should have anything to do with building houses. I think the private sector does that much better. But so we have a lot of the same problems in Canada that you have in the United States, only it's worse because the Prime Minister, or the office of the Prime Minister, unfortunately has become so powerful. Mr. Obama and Mr. Biden have tried to do the same thing in the United States. When you think about your Constitution, the U.S. Constitution originally, you were escaping sort of the oppressive power of a king. And so the wise crafters of your Constitution, they limited the power of the president almost to a figurehead. But of course, politically, this has been changing over time. And so now we have presidents issuing these fiat orders that are impacting the entire country. Think of the one that during the pandemic that Mr. Biden imposed on all of the workers, which was fought. I believe that the Daily Wire spearheaded a campaign against that. Unfortunately, it was fought back. But this is the type of thing that's happening in Canada, where the Prime Minister is appointing all of our judges, all of our diplomats, and he has over 1,500 people working for him directly, and many more indirectly. And so when you have this concentration of power in one person, it's like what Lord Acton said, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
And how long is his term? I mean, why haven't you ousted him? I mean, and then part of that is, like John and I talk all the time, because like in Europe, they've allowed all of these, migrants in, and then they're raping the women. There's all this crime. They're not assimilating. So I assume you're having these same problems.
Oh, yes, very much so. And the silver lining with Trudeau is that he is the least popular prime minister in the history of polling in our country. Even people within his own party are calling for his resignation. My opinion is that is not a decision that is in his hands. I believe it's so bad in Canada that he is being directed and controlled by foreign interests who are deciding whether or not he goes or stays. Wow. And they're going to make him stay there and sort of be a meat sack to take the bullets, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. The answer to your question about when we can get rid of him, democratically, we won't have an election in our country. It's not due until October of next year. But I think that is going to come sooner. I think Mr. Trudeau is not going to last. I think he will have to resign in the coming months.
Which I've seen a few stories floated on that, actually.
Yeah. I think. Go ahead.
I'm just curious. In the UK, they can't seem to keep a prime minister for very long. And you have the same parliamentary system. What's so different about Canada versus UK, even Australia? Changes PMs on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Trudeau's been there a very long time. What's different about Canada?
That is a great question. Yeah, it's a great question. I'll answer it by way of analogy. Imagine that in the United States, you had the Republican Party, then you had the Democratic Party, but the whole leftist wing of the Democratic Party, all of your Ocasio-Cortezes and all of those people, the Bernie Sanders, went off and formed their own party that was a purely socialist party. And what happens is, in Canada, we have that party. They're called the New Democratic Party, but they're full-on communists. And the way the votes are structured in our House of Commons, which is our parliament, the equivalent of your House of Representatives and your Congress, that third party, that communist wing, actually holds the balance of power. And so they have made an unholy alliance with Trudeau. Trudeau has a very small minority government, has been holding on to that since 2019. So for the past 5 years, he could have been ousted, but for this unholy alliance with this very leftist party. And they essentially operate as a uniparty that swings the balance of power away from our Conservative Party, which operates much like the Republican Party does in the U.S. And it's that unholy alliance which is propping up the Liberals. And we suspect that, in fact, we know that there are at least a dozen people in our cabinet, in Mr. Trudeau's cabinet, who have been corrupted by foreign influence. But Trudeau's government is preventing investigation of that, first of all. And secondly, although they're admitting that foreign interference and corruption has occurred, they're telling us, this will sound familiar to you, they're telling us they can't reveal the names of the people who have been corrupted because, of course, that would place them and the entire investigation system in jeopardy. Sounding very much like the CIA and the FBI.
Yes, they do their own thing. Are they cousins with Garland?
Yeah. But, this
gosh.
sort of ties into that. This sort of ties into that Supreme Court of Canada, Supreme Court decision in your country, because really what we're talking about is, and I watched that debate last night. I'm sure all your listeners did.
And that is on my list to talk to you about.
Yeah. The thing that became really obvious, first of all, it's very sad to see what has happened to Mr. Biden.
Oh, I know.
He's obviously
horrific.
in the late stages of very serious. I'm not a doctor, but instinctively we know when somebody is just in late stages of illness. But the thing that really struck me, that's so obvious, is you have this man as the head of the most powerful, most important country in the world. Could it be more obvious that he's not the one running the government?
Oh, it's been obvious for a long time, Leighton.
Yeah.
And, I play a doctor on a talk show. It is very obvious that man has Alzheimer's and somebody else is running the country.
Yeah. And the same thing is true in Canada. I mean, we could debate about who would win in a chess match between Biden and Trudeau. I bet on Biden if he's on the right drug mix. But it's the same thing. In your country and in my country, it's this administrative state that has seized control in a very undemocratic way. And we've seen this happen in other countries, in places like the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany and Maoist China and Cuba, where this administrative state takes over. And of course, it becomes no longer a republic. It becomes no longer a representative democracy where the interests of the people are being served by the people we're electing into office. And so I really see the Supreme Court the Supreme Court decision in the United States as a promising sign, because I think the court is signaling to legislatures, look, this is enough. It's time for you to take back this power, stop delegating all this authority to and having these bureaucratic agencies do all of your dirty work. You are legislators. You are elected by the people. Do your job.
Your job, right? Yeah. I'm just curious. What one thing you mentioned Jordan Peterson, and one thing I've always been perplexed about is what law in Canada allows the government to basically sentence him to a re-education camp for political speech.
Yeah,
I mean, I was shocked at that one.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's another great question that ties into what I was just saying, because, in Canada and the United States, we have medical college and we have bar associations. We have these professional colleges that are designed to be self-governing. And theoretically, the purpose of self-governance is so that they will be independent of government. But of course, through the tentacles and the expansion of the administrative state, what's happened is these bureaucrats have infected these professional associations. And so in my province, we have the Law Society of Alberta. You might not know this unless you read my biography, but I went through a cancel culture experience in which my law society participated because they didn't like my views, which are essentially Christian conservative. Hopefully I don't sound to your listeners like a lunatic. But no. Dr. Peterson is going through the same thing right now, where all he did is he expressed some very strong views about LGBTQ, which he's entitled to do constitutionally. But of course, again, the legislature can't touch him because he's constitutionally protected. But then what they use is the administrative state, which is this professional association, which is no longer independent, is actually co-opted by government, and it does their dirty work, and that is to penalize and to persecute Dr. Jordan Peterson publicly. Of course, in hindsight, it's a big mistake. I think it's laughable that they want to send him to some education course about social media, because he's one of the most brilliant social media people in the world. He should be teaching a course to people about how to influence through social media. He's a social media phenomenon. But that's symptomatic of the broader problem that we're talking about, is this rot, this swamp. And one of the beautiful things, unfortunately, it didn't come up last night in the debates, but people who don't know in the United States should check out Project 2025. And this is the Heritage Foundation. This is the big plan in the United States for what's going to happen if Mr. Trump is restored to the White House. And it's just incredible. They brought in some of the brightest minds, obviously, in the United States to form this really detailed plan about how to restore the United States Constitution and really the entire country back to its original state, almost like a renovation. And it's dealing with diversity, inclusion, equity. It's dealing with lawfare. It's dealing with the immigration problem. It's dealing with the economy. And it's just an incredibly grand plan, one of the best things that I've seen in a long time. And I pray that Mr. Trump is restored to the White House, if for no other reason that they've got this incredible plan the Heritage USA has crafted for your country. And I can only hope that some of that will seep into Canada.
Well, I'm hoping it actually executes. I mean, and I've heard Trump mention it, like, about firing 50,000 government workers right off the top. The senior people, basically decapitating all these agencies and stuff of all the infection that they have. The FBI, the Department of Justice. I mean, you name them, they're infected with all these leftists. Pagans, as we're calling them now.
Yes.
And and because they're godless pagans. I mean, that's they worship at the altar of government, and
yes.
and they need to be gone. And it's like I don't know if you're familiar with Dan Bongino, but like Dan Bongino said,
yes, of course.
Fire 50,000 of them. When they start screaming about it, fire another 50,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how
you're so right about.
That's how you fix it.
That's a good start. That's a good start. I think Shakespeare said something about a bunch of lawyers. Kill all the lawyers would be a good start. I think when in that play, he was not just referring to lawyers. I think he was referring to bureaucrats generally, right. Which tells you that was written 500 years ago. So it tells you this is not a new problem. But you mentioned God, and I'm glad you did, because we don't talk about God enough. And people should understand this. Countries like the United States and Canada were founded on the basis of the supremacy of God. And why is this important? People say, "Oh, well, here goes the Bible-thumping lawyer."
No, we like this. We're Bible people here.
Yes, but what people need to understand is, and I say this to people, even if you're not a Christian, or even if you're not a Jew, you should be supporting the supremacy of God, because when God is not at the head of the state, the rule of law does not exist.
Right.
And people like Justin Trudeau are a perfect example of this. He is an atheist. He's born of a family of atheists. His father was
his
died
dad?
in the
His
war.
dad was so famous,
Yes. Oh yeah. His father was a friend to Mao, a friend to Cuba, and Fidel Castro. But the thing is, he's an atheist. And of course, the atheists, if you look at the 20th century, in all the states where we had mass murder and famine, 100 million people, what you have always is atheism. And the reason why is when you don't have God at the head of the state, the rule of law disappears, it disintegrates. The Magna Carta, was part of that founding thing, and it's at the foundation of constitutions like the U.S. and Canada. But when you have someone like Trudeau, who is not answerable to anyone, think of the way David was in the Old Testament. When you're not answerable to anybody, you make of yourself a god. And of course, this is the first sin. This is the great sin of mankind, is to make ourselves gods. And of course, we know where that leads. That's the road to hell. I believe John Milton wrote a couple of poems about that once upon a time. But the thing is, this is the problem. This is why people who they don't understand. They get on this road to atheism, get God out of the schools. Like, for example, in Louisiana, where they put in the 10 Commandments. I don't know. Explain to me what could be bad for children about what's in the 10 Commandments.
I so want this. We're God people here.
Yeah, we had that
don't steal
last week. We had that discussion last week about it, and my point about that was not that we're not forcing religion on anybody. That's not what it's about. The 10 Commandments are a set of morals. It's a moral anchor.
Yeah. And
in a civil society,
absolutely.
You have to have a moral anchor. Thou shalt not kill. We have a law. Murder is against the law. That's part of a civil society. And if you don't have this anchor that says here's the basic rules. These basic rules, these rights come from whether you want to call them God, the ultimate authority, whatever, the creator of the universe. Pick your passion. There's somebody out there bigger than the human race that these concepts came from. And in the United States, that's part of our foundation. We have these unalienable rights. That means something. And you got to point to the 10 Commandments. Here's the anchor. And there's nothing wrong with teaching people from a moral basis about this.
Well, that's so funny because where we live here in the Panhandle, we have it's what is their name called, John? It's the military. We oversee all of the United States, the NORAD here. And there's a lot of Canadians here, so I always rub elbows with Canadians. And actually, I was at a military event Wednesday night, and there was Canadians. So I was talking about Trudeau because he seems to be such a disaster, and his wife left him, and I didn't realize he was an atheist. And so I think you're right. When you don't have that ultimate power, God, Jesus, to hold you accountable, you have no moral compass, and we talk about that a lot in here too. So you've explained so much. You're going to be our Canadian regular, Leighton. You just don't know that now.
Oh, well, thank you. As it happens, you might, and this might endear me to you or not. I lived for a short period of time in Florida. Back when I was an athlete, I played minor league pro hockey in Florida. At a time when, of course, you guys just won the Stanley Cup.
Yes, my daughter's like a crazy hockey person now. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but back when I played hockey, I played for a team called the Daytona Beach Sun Devils, and people could not care less about hockey. We used to stand in the parking lots of supermarkets and hand out free tickets. And,
boy, have times changed.
I was gonna say I've been to a few Tampa Bay Lightning games, and they are well attended.
Yeah, and it's so great. I mean, you guys between Tampa Bay and now the Florida Panthers, you've won more Stanley Cups than Canada has.
Yay!
Canada hasn't won a Stanley Cup in 31 years. So you're Florida. Who could imagine a whole state that's basically a giant beach could be the hotbed of hockey?
There you go. And Tampa's adorable.
Only God could imagine such a thing. Yeah.
So back to the debate. As a Canadian, I mean, Trump looked pretty good, and he, played president. He was very presidential yesterday. I do feel like, honestly, I think Biden probably had all the questions, but it was I wrote on X the Oscar for like the worst performance, Mr. Mumbly was definitely Biden yesterday. It was so painful. So what were your other takeaways, Leighton, as a Canadian, seeing this debate? I'm thankful that it happened, but I really think it was a setup to get rid of Biden. And then I turned to MSNBC, and Newsom's right there with his shiny white teeth, and his slick back hair, and he was salivating. It's sort of like when you watch a lion like kill its prey, and it's like prancing around it, going, oh. That's gone crazy.
Hillary Clinton's coming to the rescue. That's the plan. Hillary Clinton.
Miss Pantsuit.
Really interesting. Yeah, that's one of the stories I've heard about Mrs. Obama entering
Yes.
the fray. I don't.
We've
think
talked
she would
about
be,
that.
I don't. Yeah, I don't think she would be up to the task.
She hates
I don't
America
think Gavin,
too much, and she likes her chef,
Yeah.
Leighton.
Yeah, yeah, and I think she would be too polarizing a figure. I don't think that. I don't think she would be. I think she would be a choice that would almost assure Mr. Trump's victory. I think. I think you're right. I think that this fiction that the mass media and, of course, even the White House, Karine Jean-Pierre, they call her in the Daily Wire, Karine Jean Identity Hire. That's a good one.
That's
anyway,
a really good one.
Anyway, they've been presenting this myth that Mr. Biden is just he's a kind of the old grandfather and he's fine and he's fit and he's ready for the battle. And of course, this stage that he was on, it revealed ultimately that, unfortunately, sadly, he's just in the late stages of senility, whatever the diagnosis is, and he's not up to the job of being president. So I think you're absolutely right. I think that they're going to have to replace him. But the great thing about what Mr. Trump did is, yes, he took some shots at Mr. Biden, but on the whole, I think what he was attacking was Biden's presidency. And I think what Mr. Trump did very, very well is he had certain themes that he kept coming back to that Biden really had no answer for. And the big one is the impact of these illegal migrants coming into the United States, because they're impacting Social Security, they're impacting crime, and one of the low points, I think maybe the lowest.
I've witnessed it at a fancy store, points. Shoplifting. It was so scary.
Yeah. One of the low points for Biden was when he started mumbling about, Trump was talking about this poor young lady who was murdered, and he went to the funeral, and Biden starts mumbling about, women get sexually assaulted and murdered all the time by their neighbors and their family members.
That was
thinking,
atrocious.
Wow,
that was atrocious.
As a professional debater, I was going, "Whoa, Joe, you really." That was the equivalent of what you did when you visited the Pope a couple of years ago.
And nobody's commenting about that. I was shocked, and when I heard it, I was literally shocked when he said it, and I was like, "Are you joking me?" And nobody is talking about it.
But I think it's all planned, Leighton and John, because soon as the show was over, literally CNN, MSNBC went bananas, going, "Oh, he did terrible. We got to find somebody else." And if it wasn't planned, why would they have caved so much when we've been putting up with this madness now of hiding his abilities, pooping on stage in Normandy? I'm like, come on.
Yeah.
But,
you're right. And even people like Joy Reid, who are real diehard, they were throwing him under the bus. But I think the worst one, I hate to say this, is, and I have to put air quotes, Dr. Jill Biden. Jill Biden, she had this after party where she's got Joe up there.
I watched it live.
You did so great, Joe. Like, this is, to me, she is the archetype of the toxic feminist who essentially thinks that she should attach herself to a man, objectify him, and use him in order to draw wealth and power and prestige to herself. We talk all the time about toxic masculinity. To me, that's toxic feminism. What kind of a wife is she to even allow her husband? She refuses
to get off the stage, and now they're calling her Lady Macbeth. And she will not give up the mic. She won't.
That's a great metaphor, Lady Macbeth.
Is she any different than Hillary Clinton, though?
Yeah. Well,
same
I think Bill Clinton didn't have the excuse that Joe Biden has for being a moral degenerate. Bill Clinton was scopus mentis. He just, he was just a very lustful man. For all of his pluses, he was just a very lustful man. I mean, we all know
I always joke, Leighton, that I would have loved to have lunch with President Clinton because he was so charismatic. But he'd probably grab your knee. He'd probably grab your knee under the table as you were having lunch with him if you were a woman. That's my Clinton joke that I wrote.
Yeah, I think I think Bill Clinton thought he was Elvis with a law degree. Honestly,
yes. Oh my! See, you're like an American, Leighton. I'm keeping you, my new favorite Canadian. Oh my gosh! So when so I know the debate, it was a disaster. I think now they're going to change. They're going to change him out, and who will it be? Which is so scary.
Who do you think?
Well,
who do you think is coming out of the?
I've read all of these because I'm now an X addict because I just got my check mark a couple months ago. John hears this every time I have a show. I'm so excited. And I went over 2 million feeds. And so I'm like really excited because
wow.
I'm commenting on everybody, and then they Matt Gaetz has shared my stuff twice now. And like Clay and Buck, they both like my stuff. That helps when these people like your stuff. But on X, there's the chess pieces they're saying are that Kamala will become the governor of California, Newsom will become the president, and then maybe Hillary will be the VP, or Hillary's the prez, and Newsom is the young, cute. Somebody said his teeth look like white chiclets, those little piece of gum that we had when we were young. But all of these things scare me because these people, as Christians, like I am such a diehard for no abortion. And, John and I, we've had guests on here. Every baby deserves a chance to live, and so I don't know. These people are radicals. They're pagans.
Well, Veronica, the one thing that they're not talking about is the Democrat. Hello,
John. I hear you.
Yeah,
Leighton, are you still there?
Sure, Leighton.
Yeah, I'm still there. It sounds like he has an echo. I'm wondering if he's talking to us out of a burning bush.
God's joined the conversation on Veronica Live.
If you saw that movie, Charlton Heston.
Yeah, the classic. Oh my gosh.
Well, I was just going to say that the Democrats have painted themselves into a corner because a lot of people are forgetting the fact that Ohio has a filing deadline for the ballot for the presidential election before the Democrat convention. And the Democrats have decided to have a video ballot, basically, or a call-in ballot to nominate Biden and Harris before the convention. So when they say, well, we'll change it to the convention's too late. They can't file in Ohio.
That's a really good point. And, I would say this also. I think that the leftist media drawing us into this discussion about who is going to replace Joe Biden, will he be replaced? I believe, I agree that this is smoke and mirrors, but it's drawing attention away from something that's really, really obvious. And that is right now, President Trump is an unstoppable force. It's so obvious that his campaign is really unstoppable politically, and the Democrats have thrown everything at it. They've even tried to, they're going to try and throw him in jail and all that. Apparently, they don't realize that the Constitution permits him to govern from jail. But the thing is, how are they going to stop him? And what I fear, and I'm praying for him, is that Tucker Carlson raised this specter some months ago. He said, well, how will they stop Donald Trump? They've tried everything peaceful.
I know what you're going to say because we've talked about this before, that they try to take him out.
We should be talking about, the media should be talking about what an incredible campaign Donald Trump is presenting to Americans right now. It's a brilliant campaign. He could not have performed better in that, just look at how much money he's been able to raise. Even his campaign ads are spot on. Like we're seeing one of the great presidential campaigns in my lifetime. This is almost like Ronald Reagan-esque. He's learned a lot from the mistakes that were made in 2020. And I think this is what we should be talking about is, wow, this is an unstoppable force in American politics. And what could this look like? What is this going to mean for America? But instead, we're being drawn off into this sort of intrigue of talking about Joe Biden and will he be replaced. And I think I hate to use this term because it's overused, but maybe it's a bit of a psyop.
In what way though, as a psyop?
Well, they want us talking about Joe Biden. They want us talking about potential candidates for the Democrats. I think what we should be talking about is the truth, and that is Donald Trump is clearly the best person for this job. He's running a terrific campaign. He's got a great plan for America that is going to solve a lot of the problems, not only for America but globally. Because what he's talking about, and he talked about this last night during the debate, and he talks about it in his speeches. He's running for the main purpose of bringing peace to the world. And when you hear European leaders showing support for Donald Trump, that's what they're talking about. Listen to Viktor Orban. He says if him. Donald Trump is not restored to office as the president of the United States, we will have World War III. The president of Serbia said the same thing recently, that we're on the precipice of war. And only Donald
he'll be
Trump
like a Reagan, because when he was in, we never had to deal with this garbage. I don't think Russia would have invaded Ukraine. China wouldn't be like constantly flying over and circling Taiwan like a shark. No, it's been awful. When America's not the leader of the world, and I'm okay with us being the leader of the world, it has been awful, literally awful. I've been thinking, Leighton, as we've had this conversation, and now I'm in love with a Canadian, that you need to be, when Trump takes office, I'm going to nominate you to be the ambassador to the Canadian ambassador for us.
Thank you very much. But I have a much lesser ask of you, and that is, I heard you talking about your X page. I'd appreciate if people like what they've heard from me. I'd be privileged to come back on your show.
Yes.
Follow us on X. It's at Grey Matter Convo. A lot of the things I've been talking about in your program are set out there. I want to share with you before I go the funniest joke about last night's debate. And
yes,
of course,
these
great jokes, they always seem to come from the Babylon Bee. This is the headline: Trump indicted for murdering elderly man on CNN.
We've had Joel, the manager, on the show. I love that page. Oh my gosh, he's fun to follow. Well, Leighton, it's been such a pleasure, and I did like your X, and it's great, and we've got to have you back because you've had such clarity, and it's nice to know that there's Christians in Canada fighting as hard as we are to save the world, and it starts with us by talking. And I'd love to do an X space with you. So when we're talking about launching in the evening, doing one of those, I'm going to invite you because we've got to come together as allies to take out Trudeau
to do it.
And to get Trump elected. So God bless you. We've been talking with Leighton Grey from Grey Matter Podcast, and he's a hard-charging attorney up there in Canada. So God bless you, Leighton. We've enjoyed having you on Veronica Live.
Thank you. I hope you all have a great 4th of July holiday.
Thanks for listening to Veronica Live.